turn the recording on.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome again to our first metric call of 2026. I have a few housekeeping announcements. So first of all, next Thursday in the slot of the community call is our annual Neurosequential Network State of the Union meeting. And so we hope that you can attend live. We want as many people to join live as they can. Starts at 3 p.m. Eastern, just like this call. But if you can't attend live, that's totally fine. You can view the recording. But this is a required element of training and maintenance for everybody in the entire network. And so we're asking that if you can't attend live, you need to view the recording by the end of March. Okay, we try to make updates and announcements that are, pertinent, and we want you guys to have the most updated information, and we want everybody to be aware of that as soon as possible. So there will be some kind of reminder about that in the future, but again, come next Thursday at 3 p.m. if you can. If not, view the recording by the end of March. All right. Okay, second is a correction. So a few of you let me know that the schedule that I sent out through email Monday last week, I've forgotten when I sent it out, but you should have gotten a schedule of NMT implementation and community calls from me, and there was an error, just one. But the date for the April NMT implementation call was wrong. I'm not going to send out an email correction. I'm just going to tell you, and I'm going to remind you. The correct date is April 16th. So it's still in the same third Thursday slot. I just put the wrong date down. So April, is it, I'm double checking the calendar now to make sure I don't say the wrong thing.
I'm
April
pretty,
16th.
yeah, I'm pretty sure you said the 16th and then I wrote the 15th. So I just want to confuse
Okay.
everybody a little bit more, but you had it right.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Michelle. So April 16th is the correct date for the April implementation call. All right. And then my third announcement is that we are updating the location of the link for these calls and the recordings for all the calls. So I'm going to show you very quickly now where you should go to look for them starting today. I did email out that static link, so now the link will not change, okay? There's a static link for all NMT implementation and metric calls. There's a separate static link for all community calls, right? So those same links will be in place for all of 2026. Okay, so if you write it down and put it somewhere, that's totally fine. You don't have to log into either account to get it. But if you don't want to write it down, it is in your NMT1 account like it used to be. But moving forward, we're trying to move away from that NMT1 account over to the neurosequential account for as many things as possible. So, Michelle, I'm sorry, can I share my screen real quick?
Should be able
I'm
to.
sorry I asked you to, or yeah, there I can. Okay.
Yeah.
I should have, okay. There we go. Okay. So if you're in training, the location is slightly different for folks who are in training versus folks who are in maintenance. But if you're in training, you want to go into your, go to your programs, go to your phase 1 program. All right. And after the welcome and the key documents, you'll see a new section, metric implementation and community calls. And then here's the schedule. This is the same that was on that email I sent out. Here's the static link, all right, and the time and the schedule. Okay, so here's where the link is. And then tomorrow, this is where I will post the links of the recordings. All right, so you can always just come back to this to get those recording links. For folks in maintenance, the location is just slightly different, okay? It is in the maintenance version of the phase one program, and yours is at the very bottom. So if you scroll all the way down, you'll see now there's a section for NMT metric and implementation calls. Okay. I will also add a part here tomorrow where the recordings will be posted. All right. And then if you notice, this is also going to be where the NMT maintenance package assignments are. So we'll talk more about that next week on the State of the Union. But this is going to start getting populated hopefully Monday with the 2026 maintenance package. And you won't have to go to that NMT one account anymore to get that. All right. Any questions?
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yeah, it's okay. No sorries.
So I'm in maintenance. I just completed phase one. So all of this, like modules one through however many, that is the old phase one. So we're not redoing that. It'll be repopulated in the 2026 maintenance package.
Great question. A lot of people have the exact same question. Why do I see these modules in my maintenance version? And here's the reason. We are continuously making updates and improvements to the curriculum. And we want everyone to have access to all of those updates and have access to the most current version of all materials and resources. But in this particular platform, once you complete a program, it won't accept any updates that we make. And so the phase one course that once you complete it 100%, it won't take any updates. So if we add things or change things, it won't be reflected in your completed course. So that's why you have a maintenance copy, basically, because it's going to be the version of the course that accepts the updates, and you can refer to ongoing forever for all of the most updated information. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so I just don't, it's like you just leave it there for it to continue to update. You don't go through and like click complete on all those.
Exactly. Yeah, you do not have to repeat anything that you already did. It's just there for your reference.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. You're welcome. Great. That was a great question. I get that a lot. So thank you for asking. It's great to repeat that. Anything else? Okay. All right. Well, that is me. That's all from me. Michelle, I'll leave it back to you.
That was awesome. Thank you, Emily. I just want you to know that was a lot of feedback from you guys that you would like to have those meeting links and the recordings in one place instead of going back and forth. And so thank you, Emily, for doing that for us. So there's a question. So we should not be completing any of the modules in the maintenance package. So in the maintenance package, you'll have assignments. There'll be some reading assignments and some multimedia assignments. They're not actual modules, but what Emily was saying is that you can find the updated modules in your maintenance package. So you don't have to redo all of that, but we will have some assignments that is considered maintenance, which is some videos and some articles. So that's a good question. All right. Well, unless Diane or anybody else has any announcements to make, I will turn it over to Michael. And Michael, it's you and Julia, right? I don't want to freak Julia out in case it's not. Okay. So we have two amazing presenters today. Michael Ramole and Julia Batimba are going to be our presenters, and they're going to facilitate some great discussion. But thank you guys so much. It's two of my favorite people that do some of the coolest stuff in the world. So thanks for being here. And I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, excellent, everybody. Well, I am excited to be here, and I'm going to share my screen real quick. So, Julia and I are excited to be here and to share with everybody. And as we shared in September, and we had some slides and things that we wanted to go through, and we're going to kind of come back to some of that same process. But just to give everybody a heads up of kind of what to expect during our time together, we're gonna do a quick little check-in. We've got some metric questions that we're going to look at, and I don't know about you, but I do really well in kind of digging into the metric and the questions when I look at a case specifically. So we've got a few case examples of real life cases that I'm working with, and when I get stuck, one of the people that I love to call is Julia. And so you're going to get to kind of get an example of what it's like when we work together and kind of brainstorm about kiddos and what might be going on. And but we wanted to make sure that today you also have time to ask any specific metric questions that you have. And so between the two of us, we're going to be checking the inbox, the chat box. And so if you have any questions specifically there, we want to make sure that we have time for that. We're going to be doing the case kind of focus for the first half, and then we'll save some room for some questions at the end. Um, and I asked Julie if it's okay. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick little check-in, and then we're going to jump in together. I don't know about you guys, but coming into the call, there's always a lot going on right before, and it can get a little tough for me to focus. And so I just want us to take a minute, and we're gonna do the 5 4 3 2 1. This is one of my favorite things to do in a session. And I just to kind of focus on our time here. So I want you to think about 5 things that you can see, and then we're gonna breathe. We're gonna continue to breathe through this, but 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can taste, or sorry, smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And so what we're doing is we're kind of thinking big and just bringing ourselves into this moment. And so we like to take belly breaths here, breathing deep into our diaphragm. So I like to put my hand on my belly button and breathe it in. And I just want you to take a look around. What do you notice? What 5 things can you identify in your area? And just continue the breathing in and exhale out. One more. I want you to think about 4 things you can hear. Again, breathing in is through this process. 4 things you can hear. Now, 3 things you can, excuse me, you can feel. 2 things you can smell. And 1 thing you can taste. And so what I like to do, and just to kind of a challenge for you guys, is to see, are any of those things distracting you that maybe you need to turn the volume level down on those so that you can be focused during our time together. So we're going to take a breath in, just see, push those distractions aside. So breathe in and exhale out. And we're going to jump in here. So this is a little shout out real fast to there's some exciting things happening at Whole Services, and I asked Emily Wong if I could kind of give a little shout out, make sure this is on people's calendars. They're planning a symposium, and you'll want to make sure this is on your calendar. Some more information is coming soon, and so if you go to wholeservices.ca/symposium, you can stay up to date. You can subscribe, and they'll send you information when tickets are available, and some of this stuff regarding the conference or the symposium is starting to be posted there. So super excited about that, and would love to see everybody in October in Banff. So alrighty, so today's cases, we are going to be focusing on some of the questions that people have asked as far as how do we score the early developmental periods when there are cases where the child is in different settings and multiple caregivers during blocks of time that we see on the metric. Looking at also the foster care changes, how do we score that? And then our part C, our third case is how do we score those part C questions that we get stuck on? What things do we look for when we're sitting with a client, you're doing an intake, you're meeting with the family? What are some of the things that you're noticing and questions that you can be asking to help you as you score that part C? So I'm going to jump into to our first case here, and this is a child who lived with the biological parents from birth to 6 weeks. There was a it was a tense situation, and they separated at 6 weeks old. And then because of financial instability, they had to come back together and support one another. But it was still lots of conflict, frequent yelling, screaming, high intensity in the home. Then, in order to make things work, the biological mom moved in with her mother, and when the child was 7 months old, and there was a lot of conflict in between the biological mother and the maternal grandmother. And so looking at this, we want to look at some of the things of how do we score the perinatal period, birth to 2 months, with something like this. So I want to invite everybody into the discussion. How would you score this? What questions might you ask, or how like what are you listening for as we talked about that timeline, and then how does that impact your scoring? So feel free put in the chat or unmute yourself. So we've got a kiddo that has was with the biological parents, high conflict. So um, we also know that there was a difficulty between the birth mother, and her mom, the grandmother. And so wondering about the maternal history. How are we going to score this first part?
I would score it in the 4 to 6 range. And
Okay. Maternal caregivers were at times neglectful or emotionally unavailable. Okay. Yeah.
given the conflict and the fact that within the home, but then also the next generation with her own mother, it probably means she didn't have a lot of supports either. So she probably experienced it herself, and now she's got a very, very chaotic life that her infant is in the middle of.
Yeah.
Mhm. I'm thinking about the level of need a newborn baby has, and I'm tending to score closer to moderate because of the level of support that newborn baby would need and the lack of availability mom likely had. So I'm
Mhm.
looking at 8 or 9.
Sorry, I read it wrong. I would agree.
Go ahead, feel free, Julie, feel free to just unmute yourself and jump on in here.
Hi, sorry, I've got no camera. It's just broken. I'll have it for the next call. I would actually go right to the severe end of the spectrum because if we're thinking about the level of development that that child is undergoing, especially in those first 2 months, and even sort of one or two domestic episodes of violence could really significantly impact on that child. So I'd be going right up to sort of 11 or 12. Just the chaos that tends to come from an unsupported mum is throughout all levels.
Yeah. So the thing where I kind of and feel free to chime in. So this was my first encounter with the family. And so I went to the middle. I went to this 7, which was the neutral score, and then looked at things and said there are several things that bump me up to more concern and more chaos and stuff. And so I think I scored this at a 9. There were some pieces and parts that I was, I guess, in comparing to the severity, there was they cared for each other. They cared for the kiddo. It was just a lot of high conflict, a lot of inconsistency. But that was I put it in the high end of the moderate. And I think I'm hearing in the back of my head with in the back of my mind with Dr. Perry of don't get stuck on the 8, the 9 like that. But just I think it's important for us to wrestle through these different scores.
Well,
Diana,
I think a lot of the sensory input the child is receiving is going to have a significant impact in addition to everything else of the conflict between the caregivers. So yeah, we'd be way up there on the 8 to 9.
Hey, Michael.
yeah.
So I just think some of they're really hard for us to read from here. And
Oh,
so it might be good to read the anchors to us because I think some people are getting confused about what we're trying to score. And then just to your point, I would say the same thing, right? There's sometimes I'm not exactly sure what the number should be, but moderate sounds right to me, or severe sounds right to me, or episodic sounds right to me. So I would agree with you about sometimes the actual headings are more helpful to me than the actual number. So
Mhm.
and I'm trying to figure out if I zoom in, if that would help. But I'll go ahead and try and read this. I'm curious about depression and neglect. So during, just so you guys know, during the intake, there was no report of drug or alcohol use. Um, but then I'm looking at the depression and neglect. So we're looking at on the severe end includes an unremitting depression that is unresolved, leaving mother unable to engage with the infant in any meaningful way. The moderate scoring, 7, 8, 9, mother experiencing profound depression and who may only occasionally engage in appropriate caregiving behavior. The mild is history of depression that only mildly manifested following the birth. Disengagement includes mother who may meet the infant's needs, but who at times fails to engage in behaviors that would promote attachment and bonding. So I'm curious, where do we, what's your thought on the scoring here?
Do we have information on the mother's mental health history or um, anything like that?
And I apologize, there's just a little bit of an echo. Did you ask about mom's mental health?
Yeah, is there any information on mom's mental health history?
So she was seeking medication, was kind of a little bit vague about the medication that she was seeking, but clearly trying to work to manage her mental health. There is history of depression on the maternal side, and so that was shared during that intake.
I would go high moderate again, given the level of chaos that's going on. I would think there'd be some pretty significant depression going on there. So probably in the 9, 10. I mean, it's definitely high moderate at minimum.
So, and I want to keep us moving and be mindful of time. So, to me, looking at this, looking at the relationships and the heaviness of that, I fell in the high moderate as well. Mom was working hard to manage her mental health, but I also in kind of that clinical reconstruction, there was some stuff going on that let me know that the stress was causing her to there were difficulties in the connection and also feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness. And so, yeah. So domestic violence. Just for clarification, nothing was reported. There was just high conflict, is how it was described. And so I'm going to try and read these as well, starting with the severe physical assaults were almost pervasive throughout from birth through the first months of life. Moderate involves actual physical assault. The degree and severity increases with the number of incidences. And then mild is mother experiences verbal humiliation, isolation, and/or degradation during the infant's first months of life.
So there's no actual known physical touching that we know of.
Correct.
But certainly we're going with the idea that there's emotional, verbal.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about with experiences like being a victim survivor of domestic violence? It's often useful to have a sense of the overall history
Mhm.
so that we can then judge whether there's likely to have been any difference around different time periods. So what information do we have about the entire time as opposed to the perinatal
So yeah, so that's a good question, and I think the thing that the entire time that early development for this kiddo was lots of yelling and screaming between the adults in the home, whether that was between her and the biological father, or there was or the biological mother and the maternal grandmother. That was um, lots of lots of high conflict there.
Okay, so we've got, um, whilst we don't have information about physical violence, if I'm hearing it correctly, we have information about two different dyads of verbal conflict and what that would be then experienced by, um, how that would then be experienced by the child. Is that right?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I would probably bump that up to an 8, even though there's not hands-on. I would err on the side of it's still a really stressful parenting relationship in front of the child.
I agree. If you don't have proof of the physical, I don't think you can get into the severe, but I definitely think it's high moderate again, because there's a lot of chaos, and I bet there's a lot of yelling and a lot of name calling and everything else.
Yeah. When I'm to me, I'm thinking about the level of stress activation for the mother, there was fear of physical altercation. Like she was worried about that. There was none of that. But I'm just thinking state dependent wise, like what is her level of activation? Where does she move to on the continuum? And then what is that doing to the impact of the on this little developing baby? And so I pushed it to an 8 as well.
You
And
know, Michael, I'm thinking, when I was on vacation a couple last month, whenever it was, I was walking on the beach and there was a guy yelling and screaming, name calling, all this stuff. And his wife or girlfriend was slowly walking away, holding her 8 to 9 month pregnant belly and sobbing. That's what's coming to mind. So I doubt that this conflict started after the birth. It probably was before. And I'm thinking about just the her level of being able to be present for a baby, but it's not physical. So it's not great. You can't score it as mild, but what you can do is score pretty high in the other trauma category
Mhm.
to make up for, because I kind of want to, for people who actually get hit, I don't want to water that down. um, by saying just yelling and getting your feelings hurt or being, a lot of aggression is the same thing. It's not. But emotionally, your brain doesn't know that much difference between you getting hit or afraid you're going to get hit, or you feel like you've been emotionally hit. There's not a whole lot of difference in the lower part. So I don't know. I think for me, and I could be wrong, but I would probably keep it in the moderate area somewhere, probably a 7. I'd probably leave it at a 7, but score much higher in the other trauma.
So that was a perfect segue. It's like we chatted about this, Diane, because I was going to talk about how the transition, the chaos, the distress plays into that scoring as well, because we know that there was a lot of back and forth, financial instability, the high conflict, multiple moves in and out of with bio mom, bio dad, move out. Like so to me, I feel like that one is where I maybe went up a little bit more, even into the 11 and 12 range on the severe part, and then the other trauma piece, um, moving into that. And I apologize because now as I'm doing this, my eyes are getting a little. I'm struggling to read some of these. So, but the moving into the other trauma, scoring that a little bit higher as well. I'm trying to be mindful of time so we have time to get to the other cases, because I know that a lot of people want to also look at part C. And Julia, feel free to chime in here. I don't know if there's any comments in the chat as far as other questions that you guys want to make sure that we bring forward. But I'm going to go ahead.
Oh,
Oh,
could I just jump back to the drug use for that perinatal period again? So I think you said that there was no report of drug use or there
yes.
was no comment about drug use, and curious how you said you scored that.
So sorry, I'm gonna go see if I can go back.
I
So
guess if there's no comment about it, then that would stay a 7. But if there's reporting that they didn't use drugs, then that would drop lower, I'm thinking.
yes, and so this one, they said that they did not have any drug or alcohol use in the home during this period. So scoring in the minimal range.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. So this kiddo, maternal grandmother, had arranged respite for her grandchild who was 22 months of age, and they had scheduled a respite of a Friday to Sunday. And at the end of the visit, the grandma did not come to get the kid, get this little guy. This was during COVID, and so it was just kind of an extended respite, and DCFS had to get involved because of all the different restrictions. And the biological mother had delivered another child while this kiddo was in respite, and the family providing the respite did not know this. And so they became a permanent placement for this kiddo. During COVID, all the intense restrictions, this kid would have zero contact because they had to have supervised visits, and then would all of a sudden have weekend extended visits. And because of illness, or concerns of testing positive or whatever, would have long visits with the biological parents that DCFS was not able to go in and monitor when the child would return to the placement, would often return with lice, diaper rash, or very, very sick. After 14 months of going back and forth, and we're talking like we might go 2 to 4 months with no contact at like not even FaceTime or anything like that, to now I've got 10 to 14 days with biological family. Um, and coming back living with a mom who delivered a baby. So then, after 14 months of this inconsistent back and forth pattern, he was adopted by the respite family. This family unit has 4 other children. I'm sorry, 3 other children. This is a typo there. So they have a biological child, an international adoptant, a biological child, then this little guy, and a 6 month there's a 6 months difference between him and the biological sister, and then his sister was adopted as well. So looking at this, how do we score during this time? You've got a respite family, you've got a grandmother, and you've got biological mother. And so this gets a little bit, to me, can get a little bit confusing as to how do we navigate this. And so I'm curious, how do we score when the questions as primary caregiving refers to the quality and attachment and care, as well as the quality and attention provided by the primary caregiver to the child? So my question goes is, who are we scoring? Like that was a little confusing, but I'm curious, how do we wrestle with this and come to a place? Okay, so I see foster parents, all of them.
I
Can
I
I?
always look at it at the global picture during
Okay,
that period of time, rather than trying to break it down. To me, it sounds like a bunch of chaos.
yeah,
And so I can only imagine the confusion this poor children or child has. And so rather than thinking, well, this month and they're here, it's a mess,
mhm,
a big mess. And so I would say it's pretty impactful.
Mhm.
yeah.
And
So
can I
that's
clarify?
okay.
'Cause I agree with the primary caregiving category that actually is there to help to describe that chaos of sequential caregiving and then the chaos within it. I'm not 100% sure in that scenario whether when the grandmother drops the child off, whether that's meaning that the child was in the grandmother's care up till that point. So if we're talking the 13-month to 48-month period, are we saying that from 13 months to 22 months, the child was in the grandmother's care, or that the child was in the parent's care or somewhere else? And I asked that question not so much because of the caregiving category, because it's obviously high chaos, but because it will help us to know how to score some of the other items here in terms of whether we're needing to think about for the first half of this time, whether the child was with the mother or the grandmother.
Yeah, so just the little bit that we know just was that grandma had him at this point, and there was not a whole lot known or communicated about how often she had him, but this family attended church with her, and so they would see her with him at church quite often. So it's kind of assumed that she had him a majority of the time, but it's really grandma and mom have provided different accounts as to how that went down. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
And I forget who said it in the last question, but I'm looking at the global picture here too. And there's a reason grandma was the caregiver. There's also a reason why grandma went for respite and then decided not to come back. So her level of bonding with this child probably wasn't great. I mean, if I had left my daughter at 22 months, I wouldn't be able to wait to get back. Um, and she couldn't wait to not come back. So that tells me something about the quality of the caregiving, that it was far less than ideal, I would think.
Yeah. And Julie, you've got your hand raised. Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'd like to just really agree with Tony and Jacob's comments as well, because I think multiple transitions, we need to remember how distressing that is for a young child. And even if the care quality was reasonable with grandma and reasonable with the foster parents, this child is transitioning between those two. So that should immediately put them up at probably 8, 9. And the physical state of the child returning to the foster parents means that the child is obviously being neglected. I'm also slightly concerned about the number of young children that the foster parents have and how much physical actual interaction this young child is going to have when they're with the foster parents. I don't know if the system is that foster parents get paid for fostering children in the US. That can happen in the UK. And if they are a family with 3 other children, it may well have been that they were taking this on for financial reasons. They've obviously seen this family through church, but to end up with 6 children below 8, not one of those children are going to be well nurtured at the end of the day. So really, one wonders about the whole motivation behind the foster parents as well, and how much actual one-to-one care and appropriate care, age-related appropriate care this child got from any of the carers that it was in, that they were in the presence of.
I just wanted to make a quick comment on these sort of really evocative situations. We've had a couple comments like, obviously, this is the case, or what it would be like if I were in that situation. And we had a comment in the chat that relinquishment could come from a place of love. Like maybe this was a situation where, like, I'm caregiving beyond my capacity and I just have to stop urgently now because I want better care. Or I have 6 kids, but I don't think we have details about if they have resources to have school or in-home support, or like it's possible that there are supports. So I think it's just a nice reminder that when we're scoring the metric, we really have to look at what do we actually know and what do we feel like we would do in that situation, and those are 2 different things. And it's one thing that I really like about the metric, that it sort of just asks you, what do you know, not what do you think about what you know. But I just wanted to point that out. And also there was a comment about relinquishment not only coming from a lack of bonding to a child, and there could be other reasons.
Yeah. Thank you, Julia. And the I think that is really good to keep in mind because I think when it comes to the fidelity scoring, I catch myself filling in those gaps when maybe I shouldn't. I'm jumping to those things, and I think that's a really good thing to hold in mind as we do this. And so thank you for bringing that up. So here is what I did with this, and feel free to chime in. So I had a really hard time finding a number, and so I scored three different caregivers, and then I put together the score. So I scored what my knowledge of the primary care, like when he was with biological mom, and then by the maternal grandmother, and then the foster parents, and that was where I came to. And then I stuck with kind of that global picture piece of factoring them all in, and so I essentially did this scoring three times and then average it together. And so that's how I navigated this. And um, Diane, feel free to, or Michelle, jump in if I'm off there. When I looked at the global picture, looking at how because this was going back and forth, and there were so many things, I was trying to find a good way to score it, and it was a tough one.
So would you give it?
What did I give it?
Yeah.
So, and I should have written my numbers down. I'm trying to go off of memory. So we ended up, I ended up at an 8 or a 9,
Uh-huh.
because with the inconsistency with biomom and the just some concerns I had with the maternal grandmother, and her, um, she would disappear for weeks on end from the foster parents, making me concerned about what her extracurricular activities might involve, and
Yeah.
and that if she was able to provide, even when he was in her care, was she able to do that? There were some concerns. If she was using and when she was clean, she'd have him. And then when she was starting to use, just some concerns there. So I had a couple in the higher or the severe, and then foster parents were in the lower end. And so factored him in. I think it ended up being an 8.
Yeah. And so Michael I mean, we do this too. I don't do it nearly to the degree that Michael talked about. He was a little bit more thought out about it than what I would be, but you kind of take an average of all of it, right? You try to look at the global picture like we talked about, dividing up those caregivers and getting your best guess. When I listen, and this is what happens to all of us in our fidelity exercise, there's a lot of overthinking, a lot of extrapolation here that's going on with this one item, right? And then if we do that over and over again, we really get away from what we're scoring. And so I gave an 8 to Michael just in my own, but mine was not nearly as thoughtful as what yours was. But trying to take that average, right? And from the kids' perspective, and then there was a thing in the chat about chaos and transitions. We're also going to score it there, right? There's a lot of chaos, a lot of unpredictability and inconsistency. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you. And Annette, feel free to unmute.
Hi, actually, great opportunity for a question that I often have is when I am doing that and scoring across the average, particularly in these younger years, I then tend to give more weight to what's happened in the earlier part of the time period rather than just looking at, not doing the math, but just having a general calculation. So in this case, if half the child's life was in more chaos than the second half, I'd probably put a bit more weight on that just because of the developmental impact of the earlier years. But I'd be really interested to hear whether that's on the right track or not.
I'll just say I do the same. I do this, especially that 0 to 2 weeks. I look really at that attachment and bonding. And so that might be something I would be more, I don't know, I would just put more weight on certain periods. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Now the piece that I want to make sure, because I know everybody has lots of questions on part C. And so are we okay to move to the last kiddo? Okay. So Okay, so this kid is 4 years old, struggling in all settings. This is a case that I did consultation on because we were really having difficulty for kind of figuring out what to do. So no significant concerns with pregnancy or during the birth. Lives with his biological mother and father. The medical challenges, he was diagnosed with reflux and he had an allergy to milk around between 4 to 6 months. Um, he had consistent ear infections. He had to get tubes around 22 months of age. And then he had a rare allergic reaction to a medication following getting his tubes and had to be rushed to the hospital due to his heart rate dropping significantly. He's difficult to soothe. He's very, 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 very fussy. He came to me at 4 years old and still is not potty trained and using his pacifier most of the time that he was awake. He was difficult to understand. Obviously, he had the pacifier in, and whenever anything was asked of this little guy, he would scream and run uh, out of the office, down the hall, run out towards the road. He would just, it was, when they would go to the store, he was known to scream the entire time there. So, looking at this, what are some of the questions that you might have for this case? And what maybe stood out for to you? And what areas are you going to focus on or kind of pay attention to as you move into Part C? Seeing sensory assessment, OT, sorry, attachment relationships. So this kiddo is very connected, loves, wants to be with mom or dad. Mom and dad are almost 30 years old. This is their first child too, by the way. Um, let's see, Julie, feel free to unmute, and Julia, the chat is moving fast, so if I miss something, sorry.
The first thing I would want to know is how much IT was this child exposed to as a very young infant, and could they have been exposed to unintentional neglect? The other thing is that are you dealing with a child with fairly significant neurodivergence, maybe autistic spectrum disorder, so would have a very high level of anxiety and younger, and if the child had been exposed to unintentional neglect by being exposed to quite a lot of IT as a baby, etc., then their developmental age could be very reduced. Just two thoughts that I would want to get maybe a bit more info about.
So I'm going to ask a question, and I feel silly in asking this, but what do you mean by IT?
Oh, right. Screens. So did the child, it's the first child of these parents you've mentioned, did they hand the child an iPad or iPhones for
Okay.
pacifying? We see a lot of that happening in the UK, the electronic babysitter. And what ends up happening is that these children are actually being neglected, but the parents don't understand they're being neglected. And that's why I use the word unintentional neglect, because the child's focus is not on the faces and the facial expressions and the caregivers around them. They're just in their own little world, swiping away. And sometimes if this was their first child and they may not have experience or skill for child parenting, they may have found very quickly that the electronic babysitter, a phone or an iPad, soothes the child.
So, and Julie, I think we could chat for a while on this, the screen usage and the concerns there. I'm going to bring us back, if you don't mind, back to what we're as far as Part C and just the areas that we might look at as
I don't know
far
what that
as
means.
scoring piece.
It means that it's not
I
broken.
think it's another, oh, if someone doesn't mind muting, I hear some background.
You can try fixing it with a gentle pressure fixer. It says, Carl, fix the cycling software.
Could everyone mute if you have back on? Thanks. That's just another good point about, right? It's easy to think I could see these problems if the parents had done XYZ, but if we don't know, then we wouldn't want to score based on that. We just want to score based on what we're actually looking at and ask about those things because it might come up. But going down the road of why am I seeing what I'm seeing, specifically in part C, might just lead us astray to make assumptions, which would lead to scoring that could be off. But I see a lot of great questions in the chat, like what are ongoing heart rate challenges? When is he not overstimulated? Is there a developmental assessment? Has hearing been checked? Medical history, sleep. So these are all questions that are going to give us answers to part C, which is the last 30 days. Like in part C, we're scoring present day. So some of the questions around like what's the history around this might contribute to our understanding of today, but that scoring would go in parts A and B.
Yeah. So, Julia, this is the part where I'm, as the OT, someday I want to grow up and be an OT. But I'm curious, from your lens, would you mind kind of sharing what are the things that stood out to you as you're thinking about Part C?
Sure. I mean, part C is so long, so I share a lot of questions. Like I want to know what the child does on a day-to-day basis, like from a true OT perspective, like what are the meaningful occupations of this child, but what is he doing? Like, and does that yield communication? Is he using his hands for things? Is he moving his body in a way that would let me know something about his sensory motor system? There's a few questions about sensory motor. Um, when I read things like he had a pacifier up until 4 years, not potty trained, um, communication difficulties, I'm starting to think about the sensory motor system just based on that. I might be able to give a crude score, but I would probably like go back to this would be a situation I think where if this was all I knew, I'd probably go to score and then be like, oh, I have more questions about those things. And so that would lead to my second or third interview or whatever. Um, but yeah, some of the stuff like difficulty understanding him when he speaks, that feels like we can get some thoughts on the speech questions. Yeah, we have questions in the chat about what does he eat or how does eating go? Um, Diane, yeah, impulsivity, expressive and receptive language specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a case, I think, Diane, I love the point to be reminded that it's, and Julia, you mentioned it, it's the 30 days. And when I hear his story, it's hard to not start to be pulled and influence my scoring by all of that. But there are, those are the pieces that I have to hold in mind. And what is the clinical reconstruction there that we need to do, that we can do. So, and just to kind of give everybody an update because this kiddo, these are questions that I had. So he came in, the school referred him to me, and I had no idea what I was getting into really when he came for the initial assessment, and so we asked a lot more screening. He's been to a developmental pediatrician. Um, they actually referred him back to me because they weren't quite sure. And then we just started working on some basic things. And one of the first things that happened during session was to help provide safety, and we addressed the pacifier. And as we, he felt more safe. He gave the pacifier to me. And then we started working on some things, and that actually led to a change in the ear infections as they started using the pacifier less and less. And so I was like blown away by this as to kind of some of that. And Julia, I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit because I was really impressed, or like it just blew my mind on it.
Do you mean like the connection between sucking and the ear canals?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not an expert in that in particular. So if there's anyone on here who can speak more to that, I'm also just aware of the time if there's other questions. But it's a cool reminder that working with multiple professionals, even if they're working on something that you're like, that doesn't feel related. There could be a specific connection.
Yeah, and I think to me that the all the systems that are all working together and how it's all connected, like that the sequential and the networks that we have to keep in mind as we're doing all of this, looking at this. So
Mhm.
so Julie, your question, what techniques did you use to increase his sense of safety? So one of the things, we have animals here and he loves, one of our dogs. And so the dog would, I'd hang out with the dog, then the dog would go hang out with him. And then we would start to play, fetch with the dog together. And so anytime I engaged with the kiddo directly, it was a little bit intense. He would get activated, and so what I would do is I would throw the toy for the dog. The dog would go get it, and then I'd have the dog take it to the kiddo. And so we started doing this game of like almost like the serve and return, but our dog was facilitating that bit between us. And then after a little while that he would hand me the ball, or hand me the toy. And so we started doing that. And then it moved to, we have a giant exercise ball and that we would roll it back and forth. And so we did a lot of parallel stuff. I didn't make a whole lot of requests of him. And I honestly, so they live not too far from the office. And I would do 10 to 15-minute appointments and I would see him a couple times. So that way it wasn't 1 hour. It was he got to see me frequently in small doses. We would just get to that edge before we started to melt down, and I'd say, "We're all done. Go ahead and you can go home. We'll see you next week or next time." And we did that, and it took us from about September to early January of that process. And I would see him 2 to 3 times a week, 15 minutes at a time, and 15, 20 minutes, and play with the dog, play with the exercise ball, and then he'd go home. And now he's here for the full hour and riding our horses and, playing in the sand tray and doing stuff. So it is, but we start with that parallel. We do so much stuff parallel, as he continues to build that sense of safety here.
Are the parents, Michael, doing anything at home? Because it sounds what you're doing is absolutely amazing, but I'm not sure how much overall impact that potentially would have if it's only a 15-minute session 3 times a day, 3 times a week. Did you demonstrate to the parents, and did they do that maybe 2 or 3 times a day with the child in between your sessions as well? Because
Yes.
it sounds, you've had an amazing impact.
Yeah, so our thing, we're working on the family system, doing those same bits of establishing safety and consistency and predictability. But I also, 15 minutes doesn't seem much, but it was 15 minutes of felt safety with him and relational connection. And thinking about the power of what that does, that he was excited to see the dog, and then he was excited to see Michael and Alvy, and then it was that he's excited to see me, and so it's building on that to where his system didn't have to go into stage 5, like alert, and we were able to engage in that, and it was those, small doses without maxing out his system, finding the right dose for his developmental stage and his development. It did do that. It allowed that to build, and then we were able to expand from that and providing support. The thing too that I think with the parents was they thought this was the only thing that could happen. This was what was normal for their child. And to see that in 15 minutes their kiddo could do this, they started to realize that they had more hope and expectation and they could ask more for him. They could provide a little bit more support. And it was doing little things as to help also improve some of those reading cues of what was going on for their kiddo and how could they provide that co-regulation and normalizing some of those behaviors and their response and recognizing what was going on within their body. That was able to help put bring their sense of activation down, which then they were able to move into a place of co-regulation rather than co-dysregulation of pure panic in the house because they didn't know what to do. And so it was small doses. It was chipping away a little bit at a time, and those powerful little bits of relational connection where he felt safe, that recognized, other relationships outside of here, he could be safe and he could expand his window, his world of connections.
Mm.
And allowing the emotional contagion from the parents because they would be feeling calmer because you'd given them hope and a way forward, so they no longer were sort of at the acute part of the stress medium. That's really interesting. Thanks very much.
Mhm.
And
I
the
think
thing,
also letting the parents do some of the work and see that it's a result not only of what happens in therapy, but of what they do, that's very empowering and hopeful. That's that was fun.
well, and here's the cool part that I love about this, because I was able to do the metric for this kiddo. And when we sat down as a family, both parents cried and said, I see this. This makes so much sense for my child. And then it gave us a piece of saying, okay, and now here's how we're going to start to address this. And these are the areas that we can reference during, this is why we're doing this, or this is how do we support you in this. And it's a beautiful thing. The preschool actually called us and said, I don't know what's happening, but he now has extensive vocabulary. He's almost potty trained. It's super exciting. And I guess it's a good reminder of never underestimate the power of a healthy connection, even if it is minutes at a time.
Yep. Perfect. I love it. Thank you both so much. This is awesome. And next week, really, feel free to do these calls anytime. This was super fun. Next week we have the community meeting, State of the Union. Bruce will be on. Please, everybody attend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.